Have you ever been attacked by a vicious dog? Well, thankfully, I haven't either, but I was bitten by a dog this 4th of July, and I'm going to be getting into what I learned since getting bitten from the dog, spending time in the emergency room, and everything that goes along with it. Thank you, everybody, for joining me on the simulcast, and Evan in the audience. Good to see you here. All right, so it was 4th of July. I was just walking, coming back from the park. I was doing some stretching, and out of the blue, I could just see it really quickly from the corner of my eye. A little dog. I I can't even tell you what type of dog it was because it happened so quickly, but it just came out of nowhere, and I could see that it had a rope leash on it. So me having confidence in the owners, thinking it was leashed up, which it had it leashed but not actually tied to anything. I thought it was just gonna like basically yank itself as it tried to lunge at me, but there was actually nothing holding the dog, so it straight lunged at me and took a bite out of my calf. Not Yeah, he pierced the blood. I mean, he pierced the skin, went through it. Luckily, I don't know why he actually didn't manage to go completely around the calf. Better for me. And from there, I was like a deer in headlights. Had no idea what to do. Had no clue. Like, what do you do in that type of case? And this is something. One of the things that I've learned is to stay calm. Well, that's not even a reality if you don't know what to do. It's kind of like if you first start driving and someone hits you with a car. If no one's ever told you, hey, you need to get the driver's information, get their license, get the make and model of the car, get as much information as you can, get their insurance. If you've never gone through that, you're going to have no idea what to do when it happens. So when it happened to me, I was like a deer in headlights. From training jujitsu and boxing, I would have been better prepared if someone just took a swing at me. My reactions would have taken over. Here, I had no idea. I'm like, I even told her, I don't even know what to do. She's like, me neither. She's like, sorry. And I'm like, sorry, it just wasn't enough. I'm like, I already have your address. Right over went to, my mind thought, go to Google Maps, since it happened in front of their home. And this is where each situation is going to be different, because you could be walking and it's someone's dog from their house, or even a worse situation, they have multiple dogs and they leave their gate open. Or I mean, there's so many different scenarios with dogs. Or it could be a stray dog and you have really no one to take responsibility for that. And then you definitely need, regardless with any dog bite, you're going to have to go to the hospital to get a techni shot if you haven't had one in the last 10 years, which I had to go for that. And even with that, when you wash a wound, even if you use antibacterial soap and cream, the doctors need to see it because there's a chance of infection, and you could even die from infection. One of the things that I learned, which is when you get bitten by a dog, and luckily the dog actually didn't take like no skin off. One of the things is dogs have a lot of bacteria in their mouth, so a doctor will not stitch up any sort of wound by the animal, because then they could be stitching in the bacteria, which it'll be harder to see some sort of infection. And so for that reason, they don't do any stitches. She pretty much told me I'm going to have a scarf, but I'm going to put some CBD on it. And I think with that, won't have one. So I'm walking. I didn't know. I think I told the owner, I already have your address because I went to Google Maps, and I'm like, what's your name? And I got their name. I'm like, what's your phone number? And then I'm like, I think I just told them, I'm not into suing, but you're going to have to cover my medical expenses. And then I walked away, and then I'm like, I didn't even get this person's last name. And so I walked back, and I'm like, what's your last name? And then I asked, does your dog have shots? That's something you should ask. They're going to ask you. They said yes. But even if they tell you yes, I'm not going to take their word. And so I'm like, what's your dog's name? I even got the dog's name. Then with that, since I had no idea what was going on, deer in headlights, I went to Google and I typed in, what do you do when you get a dog bite? Thank goodness for Google. That's where I pretty much read that no matter what, you're going to have to go to the hospital. So off I go to the emergency room on 4th of July, and I have no insurance. So I had to apply for some emergency thing, and luckily they gave it to me, and they saw me. I have no idea what the bill is going to be. So we'll see on that. And we'll see if I'll have to get a lawyer. I'll keep you guys posted on all this fun 4th of July. The hospital experience, I pretty much hate doctors. I hate going to the doctor for many different reasons. One of them is when I go to the doctor, and the doctor, I could tell, isn't in great physical shape, and they're trying to tell me about, physical fitness and exercise. And I'm like, oh, one time I did something with my toe. Oh, I heard it being in the mountains, being dumb. I dropped like a boulder on it, had to get my toenail ripped off. And then years later, playing basketball, same thing happened, same toe. And this time I did it myself. I ripped off the toenail. Then I was watching it heal, and then I found out about a doctor I could go to, kind of free. At that time, I didn't have insurance either. Waited. The doctor looked at it for like 1 minute. I learned way more information, YouTubing it and medical MD, than what the doctor spent time looking at it. He's like, "Oh yeah, it's gonna grow back," and that was pretty much it. So I was pretty disappointed. And then now, you know, from my experience, even going into CVS, which is like a pharmacy store or any place, they have like 18 different shots, and they're like basically trying to sell it to you. I've been a salesman plenty times. I know when you're trying to sell me something. You go into the hospital, they don't make you feel, at least my personal experience is, I felt like a piece of meat. I was just being moved along, waiting. I think it's 2022. There has to be a better way to be able to treat patients and get them seen faster. Maybe you guys feel that you guys can't justify to charge the prices that you charge if you get us in and out quickly. And I know you guys deal with a lot of trauma patients and, like horrific things, but still, I spent way too much time in there just to get a tetanus shot, put a bandage, like the maybe it's from years of boxing and having other injuries and taping myself personally, but the person who taped up that gauze, that thing fell off the same day. It wasn't well done. You know, when I was in there, I was kind of like didn't know the whole process because I don't go to doctors or emergency rooms. So I think I saw like two different doctors. One of them was through the window. I guess it's kind of like a screening to see if you qualify to move on to the next thing. Other things that I don't like about the hospitals is that they all have different prices. So depending on how much money you have and your insurance, you can go and, just for laying on a bed, it'll be 1,200, and then in another like rich hospital, maybe like it'll be like 20,000. And I think with some sort of law, they could keep all this private. So it's just like a big money maker. Maybe because they see so many people, and I'm sure not everyone survives. They all seem to try and treat you cold, even if you're trying to be friendly and talking to them. Doesn't seem like none of them. Just it reminded me of when I worked at the bank, and I thought a lot of the people that worked in the bank were pretty soulless because, and that's my opinion, because if you look at the movie documentary that they made on my work, which is called Dirty Money, and it was on Netflix. It's all about the banking and all the things they had to do. A lot of people there were okay with doing it, and I think they actually enjoyed it. Some of the people there were just trying to make money. Some of the people there, I don't know. But so moving on, I didn't like the whole hospital experience. I didn't ask the right questions. It was 4th of July. I have to be on antibiotics now for 10 days. And I told them, where can I go? And they're like, well, I'm not quite sure. Now, going back, hopefully you don't have to spend any time in an emergency room. But on a holiday, everything was closed, so I couldn't get it. Really, the hospital should have provided me antibiotics for that day. They didn't. And this is something that I reflected on after the whole experience. If I were to get an infection, I think that they could be held liable for not giving me antibiotics that day. I'm not quite sure, but if I were to go back, I would at least, and like I said, I hope I never go through this experience, but I would know better questions to ask. I thought I was going to see the doctor one more time. Like, you just feel like you're just being herded through. So I thought I was going to see the doctor one more time to ask, well, when can I start working out again, running? It does hurt. I feel it. And my biggest concern is getting an infection. As I mentioned, the infections could even cause death. I was Everything that I Googled after this and read, it said that from what reading, it said that it's not that common. But on this YouTube channel, it's called How to Survive, and they have a lot of followers. According to them, there's 4.5 million bites per year in the United States, and that video was made 2 years ago. So that is a lot of bites, and nearly 1 of 5 of those get infections, and some of them could lead to death. So after that, I'm like, well, I'm gonna look to see what I could find, and I found a video by a former Navy SEAL named Clint Emerson. And I thought he gave really excellent tips. Some of these things I didn't even realize after learning about, that the doctors can't actually stitch that up. So it's got to heal in a different way. I'm even more thankful that it was a smaller dog and not a bigger dog. But in some cases, there are things you can do to try and de-escalate. But if it's attacking you, according to the Navy SEAL, he said, and luckily it didn't get to this part, because if the dog that attacked me was vicious, he would have kept trying to bite me, and at that point I would have kicked it or punched it. But this dog only bit once and then took off running. So if you're going to give up any part when a dog's jumping at you or lunging, don't give the front part of your arm. You want to give your forearm part, because all the vital arteries are in this part, and it'll just make it easier for you to bleed out and die quicker, depending on where you are, how long help gets there. Also, you want to clench your fist, not because you want to punch the dog, but it's a lot harder, and you'll maybe lose a finger depending on the size of the dog. So if they just bite the forearm, it'll be easier to get them to let go of this than to get them to let go of your fingers. And then he says to punch him in the nose and the muscle, because basically, some people say the eyes, but they're smaller targets. And when it comes down to a life and death situation where the dog's really attacking you, since they're small, you could miss, and now you're giving a dog another opportunity, maybe to get you in another vital spot. So go for the biggest targets you can. Fight with a vengeance. It's a matter of life and death. And make sure that you let that dog know that you're the alpha in the situation. So I thought those were great tips, because there are some videos that, in my opinion, were trash and didn't really have very useful information. This other one is How to Survive a Dog Attack According to Science, and it's on that channel that I got, which I already mentioned, about how many bites happen in the United States per year. And the first one that they say is to stay calm. And I laughed at that one when I heard it, because everything happens so quick, you're not going to stay calm. And this is what I was talking about earlier. If you don't have a plan, because our brain can really recall things almost like instinct, and that's where you want to get to. If we run through these scenarios in our head, some people will be like, don't be negative, but I think it's better to be prepared than not to run through these scenarios. We don't have to think what number to dial when there's an emergency in the United States. Everybody knows it's 911. So if something horrific were to happen, some sort of emergency, even if you're kind of like zoned out or what's going on, dial 911. It's instinct. You don't have to think about it. So if you ever get bitten and it's in front of the owner's place, no, get their first, their last name, get their phone number, get their address, get the dog's name, find out if the dog has shots. It's going to vary in state per state. I'm in California. So in California, you have to report any dog bite, even if it's an intruder breaking into your home and your dog attacks them to defend them, you have to report it by law. I called the police department. The receptionist wasn't quite sure, so she transferred me to, I forget what department. She wasn't quite sure. She's like, I don't want to give you wrong information. I'm like, well, she's like, I can have a police officer call you. I was during my lunch break, so I'm like, you know what? I don't have time. I'll call back later. But while I was in the hospital, one nurse was helpful and she told me, call the humane department, humane society. So I called the humane society and I reported it, and that's who you're supposed to report it to. Luckily, what they'll do in California is they make the dog go into quarantine for 10 days, and this is to find out if the dog has rabies or not. If the dog does show symptoms of rabies, it could be basically euthanized. The doctor made me feel a lot better, at least one of them. He told me that most United States doesn't really have any sort of rabies cases. I think it has had 20, I forget in how long, and those were really from bats. That in the United States, the rabies cases do not come from dogs. And I heard if you do get rabies, you have to take like 21 or 31 shots all in the stomach. So I sure hope this dog does not have rabies. And they're able to be quarantined in the owner's home. I'm not, I guess, depending on how many prior attacks the dog has had or reports, if the owner, and then if it's something like not safe or not, depending on some circumstance, then they could quarantine the dog in the actual like humane society or a pound. And then if the owner doesn't comply, they could be fined. I forget how much, and even do up to, I think I read, 1 year in jail. So I still really, I'm not clear, and it might depend on your state whether you have to report this as a report on to the police. If you're, especially if you're going to get a lawyer, I told them I just want to make sure I'm covering every base. So this, according to the video, getting back to it, stay calm. And to me, like I mentioned, the only way to do that is to have a plan. Number two, and this one to me is a little, I wasn't expecting them to say this, but it's look away. Don't look at the dog like straight eye contact. Look at it at an angle, turn your angle to it. A lot of it basically is your actions could cause the dog, because of the excitement, to just get some sort of wrong idea, and it's going to react to your actions. And so the best thing to do is look away, look to the side, don't face it directly. That'll make it feel more confrontational. Number three is put anything you have between on the ground, jacket, shoe, hoodie, basketball, between you and the dog. It'll, according to them, according to science, it'll make them have the perception that it's some sort of shield or a fence. They said, do not attempt to hit the dog with that object. It's just going to make it more aggravated and attack you more. Number four is back away, and back away slowly. Also looking sideways, not directly at the dog, to avoid it from getting more aggravated or feeling that it's in danger. So you start backing away, backing away. After like a minute or two, you can walk a little bit faster. Number five is another one I wasn't expecting them to say, but it's curl up into a ball. And that is to protect your most vital parts, which is your face, your stomach, and your neck. So to me, based on the other information I was reading, is you want to cover up your fingers. So it's almost like you're going to cover up in a ball, cover up your neck, cover up your face, all at the same time. And like I said, I wasn't even bitten by a large dog, and it's so far not been a great experience. I can feel my foot throbbing right now as we speak. It's just like pounding here and there, here and there. Number six, what they recommend is to find a weapon, any sort of weapon. This is if all worse goes to worse and the dog attacks after you try everything to do to de-escalate, then find a weapon if you can, rocks, sticks, anything. Also, if it is attacking, they say to grab anything else and like throw it to see if it'll stop attacking you and go after it. I watched another video and they gave a good idea, which is if they have a collar, you can use it, pull up on the back of the collar and then to the side, and it's basically like a jujitsu choke. It's doing a blood choke to the dog, and instead of like it not breathing, it's just gonna like put it out. You don't want to hold it long because it just depends. Matter of life and death. I'm gonna use that collar, do a blood choke if I can get it. It's very dangerous. You want to avoid it at all cost. And like I said, I hope no one experiences this. But after thinking about this, I'm like, well, this happened to me for a reason. If I could help anyone kind of be prepared, not go through that deer in headlights mentality after being bitten like I did, because I'm a runner. And right now, since I live in California and Cadillac converter thefts are so hot, my Cadillac converter got stolen. So I'm doing a lot of walking now. Because of that, everyone I see, and even it's pretty sad. Everyone's so distracted with their phone, driving with their phone, texting with their phone. You know, people are just it's pretty ridiculous. So you need to be careful with that. And then so many careless people. And let me put this out there. I love dogs. I should have said this from the beginning. I love dogs. I'm a dog person. Between a dog and a cat, I love dogs. I used to have dogs. Right now I don't, because I don't have a good place for like a backyard, and they're a lot of time. They're, to have a dog is a big responsibility. You have to have shots, you have to have everything else for it, which when I reported the dog, that's something else that they're going to check, because you're supposed to have everything up to date. And if you don't, I I want these owners to, if you're going to not take care of your dogs, then you shouldn't have dogs. I love dogs, and I was part of a Toastmasters before, and some guy did a speech on euthanizing dogs, and I had no idea how many dogs get put to sleep every year. And when I heard that, it broke my heart. I'm like, that's sad. All these breeders, it's a deep issue. But if you're gonna get a dog, you should adopt a dog, go to the pound. I'm still love dogs. I hope I don't have any sort of trauma where like I see dogs and I'm a little bit like hesitant from them. One, because they can sense it. But I'm a dog person, so I have nothing against dogs. I I I would still get a dog. So yeah, I hope this helps out anybody, and thank you everybody who's been popping in and out, watching on the simulcast. This is episode 126 of Athletic Definition. I will be back tomorrow with another show. Not quite sure what I'll do. If you speak Spanish, then you can check out the replay of my first Spanish show here on Fireside. I had a athlete from Mexico who's running Badwater this upcoming Monday, which is the toughest ultra marathon in the world, 135 miles in the heat from Nevada, ending in Mount Whitney, California. So check that out. You can find that exclusively on Fireside until I put it out in a few days as a podcast. So I will be back tomorrow. If you want to know what subject or what time, be sure to follow me here on Fireside, and I will see you later on. Thank you so much, Evan, here for joining me. And I guess before I close out, Evan, if you have any questions, comments, anything about dogs, have you ever been attacked? You're more than welcome to come up here and share that with me and the audience. If not, then I will close out. And thank you everybody once again for joining me. Till tomorrow, this is Coach Razy.